The train screamed as it slowed, a long iron sigh that vanished into the wind. Evelyn Hart pressed her gloved hands to the window, watching the plains stretch forever, yellow grasses rippling under a bruised November sky. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got more powerful stories coming every single day, and you don't want to miss them. Now, let's begin. When the carriage lurched to a stop at the River's End station, she gathered her valise and stepped down into a world that smelled of coal smoke and cold rain. Boston was a memory now. Polished marble floors, soft lamps, and a fiancé who had promised forever, then left without explanation. The frontier air bit at her cheeks, raw and honest. She liked that about it. The station was little more than a weather-beaten shed. Two men hauled crates from the baggage car. An old woman waited, knitting by lantern light. Beyond the platform, the prairie rolled out like an ocean that had forgotten its water. Evelyn approached the station master, who was stamping his feet for warmth. "Silver Hollow?" she asked. "Stage won't run till morning," he said, tipping his hat toward the darkening sky. "Storm's coming. You'll need a place in town." The winds picked up, lifting her scarf and tangling it across her face. Somewhere in the corner of her eye, a tall man sat with his hat low, mending a shirt by the dim light. His hands were clumsy, his shoulders broad, the kind of man the land itself might have built. Evelyn squared her spine, suitcase in hand. She had crossed half a continent for a new life. The rest, she told herself, she could manage from here. The storm arrived without mercy. Rain drummed the roof of the station like 1,000 impatient hands, and the lantern light trembled in the draft. Evelyn hugged her shawl tighter, her breath turning to mist. The old woman had long since been fetched by kin. Only the station master, the stranger in the corner, and Evelyn remained. Lightning flashed, revealing the man's face for the first time. Rugged, lean, eyes the gray of distant thunder. He cursed softly as the needle pricked his thumb, smearing a tiny streak of red on the pale fabric he was trying to mend. Evelyn hesitated, then rose from her bench. "You're making war on that shirt," she said, her voice wry but kind. He looked up, startled, then smiled, a small, reluctant curve that softened the hardness of his jaw. "Seems the shirt's winning," he admitted, voice low and roughened by years outdoors. "May I?" She took the needle from his hand before he could protest. Her stitches were neat, swift, practiced. He watched, hat in his lap, as the rain pounded the walls around them. "Cole Maddox," he said after a moment. "Ranch is out past the ridge. You headed to Silver Hollow?" "I am," she replied. "Evelyn Hart, the new schoolteacher. Or, I will be if the river doesn't carry me off first." He chuckled, a rare, quiet sound. Outside, thunder rolled like a drumbeat from the hills. When she finished the seam, he flexed the fabric, impressed. "Thank you, Miss Hart." "You're welcome, Mr. Maddox," she said, smiling faintly. "Though next time, perhaps buy sturdier shirts." The wind rattled the door, and in that fragile moment of laughter, the storm no longer felt so large. By the time the rain eased, the night had swallowed the plains. Water pooled in the ruts outside the depot, glinting like spilled mercury beneath the station lantern. The last train whistle faded into the dark, leaving behind a silence so deep Evelyn could hear her heartbeat. The station master pulled on his coat and nodded toward the road. "Stage won't run till dawn. River's End Hotel is half a mile yonder, if you've a mind to brave it." Evelyn looked out at the mud and the empty road shimmering under the rain. Her resolve faltered, just a little. Before she could answer, Cole Maddox rose, settling his hat on his head and lifting his repaired shirt from the bench. "I'll see her there," he said simply. His tone left no room for debate. Evelyn protested out of habit, not conviction. "You needn't trouble yourself, Mr. Maddox. I can manage." He met her gaze, steady as a post. "Storm like this, A lady shouldn't walk alone. Wouldn't sit right with me." She sighed, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Then I suppose I'm in your debt again." They stepped into the night together. The wind still whispered through the grass, carrying the smell of wet sage and smoke. Cole walked a pace ahead, lantern swinging from his hand, his shadow long and certain. The light caught the raindrops in her hair, turning them briefly to silver. When they reached the hotel, a low wooden building glowing with firelight, he lifted her trunk as though it weighed nothing. "Safe and sound," he said, tipping his hat. Evelyn hesitated in the doorway, warmth spilling over her boots. "You've done more than most strangers would." Cole gave a faint grin. "Maybe I aim to be something other than a stranger." If you're still watching at this point, I know you're hooked. Go to the comments, rate this story out of 10, and tell us your favorite part so far. Smash that like button and let us know. Now, let's continue. Morning broke, clean and bright. The storm washed away into a hard blue sky. Evelyn woke to the faint clatter of dishes below her window and the smell of coffee drifting up from the inn's kitchen. She dressed quickly, pinned her hair, and stepped outside to meet the town that would now be hers. The air was sharp, alive with the scent of wet earth and horses. Silver Hollow was smaller than she'd imagined. A single dirt street stretched between the station and a line of false-fronted buildings. A general store, a blacksmith, a chapel, and a saloon whose windows glimmered with red curtains. Beyond them, the prairie rolled on, dotted with low fences and grazing cattle. Cole Maddox was already there, talking with a man loading barrels onto a wagon. He noticed her at once, tipped his hat, and crossed the street. "Morning, Miss Hart. Thought I'd make sure you found your bearings." "I believe I'm beginning to," she said, though her shoes were already caked in mud. He chuckled. "That's how you know you belong." He led her toward the edge of town, where a small white building stood with a crooked bell on top. "Your schoolhouse," he said. "Needs a fire in the stove before the children freeze." Evelyn stepped inside. The air was cold and still, dust motes spinning in the light. Rows of rough benches waited like an audience for her next act. She ran a hand over the teacher's desk, worn smooth by years of use, and smiled. "It'll do." Cole leaned against the doorway, watching her with quiet pride. "It'll be better than that, Miss Hart. You'll make it yours." She turned toward him, heart lifting a little. "Then I suppose I'm home." By Monday, the schoolhouse was alive with sound. Boots clattered on the steps, laughter spilled through the doorway, and a dozen curious faces peered up at their new teacher. Evelyn stood at the front, hands folded, heart racing beneath her calm smile. She had expected shy children. These were anything but. A boy in the back whispered something that made his friends snicker. Evelyn paused mid-sentence, turned, and fixed him with a steady gaze. "If you've something clever to share, Mr. Tillman, we'll all be glad to hear it." The room fell silent. Then a few giggles broke out, and even the boy smiled. Control, she realized, didn't always require scolding. That afternoon, as the last child left, a young woman appeared at the door carrying a basket. "I'm Anna Maddox," she said brightly. "Cole's niece. Thought you might not have had dinner." Inside the basket were bread, stew, and a slice of pie, still warm. Evelyn thanked her and invited her in. They spoke as the light faded, about the students, the weather, the stubborn stove. Anna laughed easily, with the same quiet strength as her uncle. When Anna left, Evelyn lingered by the window, watching the plains blush with sunset. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt certain she was meant to be here. The prairie, the school, even its rough edges, they all felt like possibility. The following Saturday dawned soft and golden, the prairie washed in light. Evelyn had barely finished sweeping the schoolhouse when Cole appeared at the door, hat in hand. "Thought you might need a guide to see what Silver Hollow looks like when it isn't working you to death," he said, half grinning. She hesitated, then smiled. "A guide sounds useful, provided he doesn't charge too much." They rode in his wagon beyond town, following a narrow trail that wound between cottonwoods until the sound of water reached them. The creek glimmered like glass, its banks crowded with wildflowers. Cole spread a blanket and handed her a basket Anna had packed. Inside were bread, cheese, and apples polished to a shine. They ate in easy silence for a while, the air filled with birdsong and the low murmur of the stream. Then Cole spoke, voice quiet. "I came here after the war. Land like this, it teaches you to start again." Evelyn nodded, understanding more than she could say. "I came to start again too, just without knowing what that means." He met her eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. A recognition of loneliness softened by hope. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and water. For the first time in years, Evelyn laughed freely. Cole smiled at the sound. "That," he said, "belongs out here." By late spring, Silver Hollow was humming with excitement for the annual church social. Lanterns swung from fence posts, fiddles tuned in the square, and the smell of fresh bread drifted through the cool evening air. Evelyn arrived with Anna, her best dress brushed clean, her nerves fluttering like trapped birds. Cole was already there, helping string lights across the yard. When he caught sight of her, he paused, the rope slack in his hands. "Miss Hart," he said, voice quieter than the music starting up, "you make this town look better than it deserves." She laughed. "Flattery, Mr. Maddox, will win you only one dance." "That's one more than I expected." The first fiddle struck up a reel, and soon the yard filled with couples. Children darted between skirts and boots, chasing each other through the dust. Evelyn danced with two of her older students, then with the town's storekeeper, her laughter rising with the music. But when Cole finally offered his hand, she didn't hesitate. He guided her into the waltz, surprisingly light on his feet. The lantern light caught the gray in his eyes, and for a moment everything else blurred, the people, the music, the world itself. "You dance well, Mr. Maddox. Only when the company's worth the effort." When the song ended, neither stepped back right away. The crowd clapped, the music rolled on, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Evelyn felt like she belonged, not just in the town, but beside the man holding her hand. If you're enjoying this story right now, subscribe, and don't forget to give this video a like. Winter crept in quietly, whitening the prairie until the world seemed made of breath and silence. The children came to school wrapped in scarves and laughter, their boots leaving muddy ghosts by the stove. Evelyn kept the fire burning, taught with her coat still buttoned, and found comfort in the rhythm of lessons and laughter. Cole stopped by often, under the pretense of checking the roof or bringing wood. Sometimes he stayed to help fix a stubborn hinge, or share a cup of coffee while snow tapped the windows. Conversation came easy now. Books she loved, cattle drives he dreaded, the way the stars seemed closer out here. One evening, when the wind howled like a living thing, he brought a worn book of poetry. "Figured a teacher ought to have something to read besides arithmetic," he said, half shy. She smiled and read aloud, her voice soft against the storm's growl. When she looked up, Cole was watching her, not with longing exactly, but with a kind of quiet peace. As the weeks passed, their visits became part of the season itself. Neighbors noticed, though no one spoke a word. Evelyn found herself looking forward to the creak of his boots outside her door, the way he'd knocked twice before stepping in. By the time the thaw began, it felt strange to remember the days before he'd come calling. The winter had been long, yes, but it had also been kind. Christmas Eve arrived beneath a sky full of stars sharp as glass. The schoolhouse, trimmed with pine boughs and paper garlands, glowed with candlelight. Evelyn had invited her students for carols and cocoa. Laughter and song filled the little room until the last family drifted home through the snow. When the door finally closed behind them, silence settled soft as wool. She was banking the fire when a knock sounded. Cole stepped in, brushing snow from his hat, cheeks ruddy from the cold. "Didn't want the night to end without seeing you," he said. "Brought you something." He held out a small wooden box, carved smooth but plainly made. Inside, on a fold of blue cloth, lay a silver locket, oval, simple, and well-loved. Evelyn opened it carefully. Inside were two children in an old photograph, faces solemn, eyes familiar. "My sister and me," Cole said quietly. "Only thing I kept from before. Mama gave it to me when she left for town one winter and never came back. Thought maybe it'd mean more with someone who'd keep it safe." Evelyn's throat tightened. "It's beautiful, Cole. Are you sure?" He nodded, looking into the fire. "You've got a way of making this place feel like more than fences and dust. Figured that's worth a keepsake." She closed the locket, holding it to her chest. "Then I'll keep it close," she whispered. Outside, the snow began again, gentle, endless. Cole stayed a while longer, the two of them talking softly as the candles burned low. When he finally rose to leave, Evelyn touched the locket once more, and knew the winter would no longer feel lonely. By March, the snow melted into rivers that sang through the valleys, and the prairie came alive again. Shoots of green pushed through the mud, and the air smelled of thawing earth. Evelyn opened the schoolhouse windows wide, letting in the light, the laughter, and the scent of spring. The town, too, seemed to wake from hibernation. Men mended fences, women scrubbed porches, and the church bells rang brighter. Cole was busier now with calving season, yet he still found time to stop by, sometimes with a sack of apples, sometimes just to listen as she read to the children. One afternoon, as she swept the porch, he arrived on horseback, his shirt dusted with sunlight. "You've tamed this place," he said, smiling. "Even the Tillman boys say ma'am now." She laughed. "That might be your doing. They seem to behave better when you're around." He dismounted, tied his reins, and looked at her for a long moment. "I think about what comes next, Evelyn. When school lets out, when the days turn long again. Maybe there's a way we don't have to part come summer." Her heart fluttered. She met his gaze, steady and sure. "Maybe there is," she said softly. They stood there, the wind tugging at her skirt and his hat brim, spring sunlight painting them both in gold. The promise between them needed no more words. The evening sun stretched long shadows across the hills when Cole asked Evelyn to ride with him. They followed a narrow trail that climbed above the valley, where the air turned cool and the grass whispered in the wind. Below them, Silver Hollow lay quiet, a handful of rooftops shining in the fading light. Cole stopped his horse at the ridge and helped her down. For a moment, they stood side by side, the horizon spilling gold and violet across the sky. "I come up here when I need to remember why I stayed," he said, voice low. "All that land, all that sky. It reminds me a man can begin again, if he's brave enough." Evelyn smiled, the wind tugging at her hair. "And have you begun again?" He reached into his coat, pulling out a small ring, plain silver, polished smooth by time. "Not yet," he said. "Not without you." Her breath caught. "Cole." He took her hands gently. "I've got little more than this land and what I can build on it. But I'd like to build it with you, if you'll have me." Tears stung her eyes before she could stop them. The world seemed to hush around them, the wind, the birds, even her own heart. "Yes," she whispered, and the word felt like home. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she leaned into him as the sun dipped below the hills, the sky turning to fire. The ridge, the world, and their future stretched endlessly ahead. June arrived with wild roses blooming along every fence, and sunlight warm enough to chase the chill from the air. The little white church at Silver Hollow overflowed with people. Students in borrowed coats, ranchers with clean hats, women clutching flowers picked from their own yards. The bell rang bright as morning as Evelyn walked down the aisle, her simple dress brushed with lace and hope. Cole stood at the front, nervous for the first time she'd ever seen him. When their eyes met, the noise of the crowd faded until it was just them, the man who had taught her steadiness, and the woman who had taught him peace. The minister's words blurred into warmth and laughter. When Cole kissed her, the whole town cheered like family. Outside, the sunlight spilled gold over the prairie. Anna threw petals until they tangled in Evelyn's hair. Children ran after the wagon as Cole helped her up beside him, ribbons streaming from the back. They rode toward the horizon, where the land opened wide and unbroken. The road stretched ahead, full of dust and promise. Evelyn leaned against his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breath, the ring cool against her finger. "Do you ever think about Boston?" he asked softly. She smiled, watching the sky turn to rose and blue. "Not anymore. Everything I came looking for is right here." The wagon creaked forward into the setting sun, and the prairies swallowed them whole. 2 hearts, 1 home. Endless sky. Years later, the schoolhouse still stood, its bell ringing clear across the valley. Children's laughter carried on the wind, mingling with the lowing of cattle from the Maddox ranch. Evelyn taught each morning, Cole rode the fences each dawn. In the evenings, they sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, her hand resting in his. The prairie had given them its hardest lessons, and in return, its quiet joy. Thank you for watching till the end. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. We'll be dropping brand new powerful stories every single day. See you on the next one.